let me paint you a more detailed picture of that bone-chilling night up in the woods. It all started because of a dare, as these things often do. We were a group of 6 buddies, adventurous and sometimes a bit foolish, sitting around a campfire on the edge of a forest so dense it felt like it could swallow us whole. The dare was simple enough. Spend a night in the woods with no phones, no distractions, just us and nature. Jake, one of our friends, had heard about the Wendigo legends from some locals, and he thought it'd be amusing to spook us a little. We all chuckled, thinking it was just an excuse to share some ghost stories. So, there we were, laughing and joking, with a stack of beers and snacks. We expected nothing more than a good laugh and some memories to cherish. The woods around us were thick, and the darkness beyond the firelight seemed infinite. It was so quiet, eerily quiet, but we attributed it to the usual hush of the wilderness. Hours passed, and we were in the middle of swapping ghost stories, with each tale becoming more exaggerated and ridiculous than the last. The woods remained quiet, but it felt like something was watching us, like the trees themselves had eyes. And then it happened. A low, guttural growl, emanating from the impenetrable darkness beyond our campfire's reach. Laughter turned to silence, and we all froze, exchanging nervous glances. We couldn't believe our ears at first. Maybe it was a bear, we thought. We'd heard that they roamed these woods. But the growl, it didn't quite fit. Then, in the shifting shadows, we saw it. A fleeting glimpse of something tall and skeletal between the trees. Our flashlights barely had time to catch it before it darted out of sight. Panic gripped us as the figure circled us, just beyond the edge of the firelight. Those eyes, glowing like molten coals in the night, fixed on us. We knew we had to get the hell out of there. So in a surge of fear and adrenaline, we abandoned everything but our flashlights and bolted. It was sheer chaos, crashing through the underbrush, stumbling over roots and rocks. But then, as we sprinted through the woods, one of our friends, Mark, lost his footing and fell hard. We all skidded to a stop, our hearts pounding, and turned to see Mark sprawled on the ground. He was dazed and disoriented, trying to get back on his feet. But the Wendigo was closing in fast. We screamed at Mark to get up, to run, but he was too slow. The Wendigo was upon him, its skeletal fingers reaching out. In a desperate lunge, we managed to grab Mark and pull him to his feet just in the nick of time. His face was as white as a sheet, and he was babbling about the Wendigo's eyes. We took off again, Mark stumbling along with us. The Wendigo's bone-chilling screeches seemed even closer now, and we knew we had to reach safety soon. We didn't have a plan. All we could think of was to put as much distance as possible between us and that nightmare creature. The woods blurred past us as we sprinted through the darkness. It felt like we were in a never-ending nightmare, with no way out. Mark kept glancing over his shoulder, like he expected the Wendigo to pop out from behind a tree and grab him. I couldn't blame him. We were all terrified. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we burst through the trees and found ourselves in a moonlit clearing. Our car was parked not too far away, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. We urged Mark to find his inner Usain Bolt and keep moving. But just as we reached the car, Mark's legs gave out, and he hit the ground again. We were all screaming at him to get up, to move, to do something, but he was just lying there, wide-eyed, mumbling about those eyes again. The Wendigo burst through the trees, illuminated by the car's headlights. Its eyes glowed like evil LEDs, and its freaky mouth was wide open, showing off those razor-sharp teeth. It lunged toward us, those skeletal fingers reaching out like death's icy grip. We managed to drag Mark to his feet just in the nick of time. The Wendigo was so close we could smell its rancid breath. I swear it was like a scene out of some messed-up horror flick. We piled into the car, slammed the doors shut, and locked them with trembling hands. The Wendigo started clawing at the windows, screeching like a banshee with a toothache. I thought the glass was going to shatter any second, but it held. We started the engine and floored the gas pedal, leaving that freaky thing behind in the dust. As we sped away, Mark's breathing finally slowed down, and his trembling started to ease. We were all drenched in sweat, hearts still hammering, but we were alive. and that's what counted. We drove until we reached the nearest town, where we dumped Mark at a hospital. The docs couldn't find anything physically wrong with him, but they could see he was shocked. They recommended therapy, counseling, and maybe a whole lot of whiskey. All right, they didn't actually say that last part, but you get the idea. Over the next few days, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The Wendigo? That was some next-level stuff that had no business being in our lives. Mark, in particular, was a wreck. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, soaked in sweat, and start babbling about those eyes and that bone-chilling cold. It was like he was still out there in the woods being hunted. In the end, we had to learn to live with the trauma, each of us carrying the weight of that night in our own way. Our tale serves as a warning to anyone thinking about venturing into the woods. There are things out there that defy logic and explanation, things that lurk in the darkness and can turn a fun night out into a lifelong nightmare. We survived our run-in with the Wendigo, but we'll never forget the terror of that night. It's a story we'll be telling around campfires for years to come, a story that'll make your spine tingle and your skin crawl. So, take our advice. If someone warns you about the woods at night, you might want to listen, because you never know what's out there, waiting in the darkness. Alright, so picture this. I'm out in the woods, chasing that thrill that comes with camping alone in the middle of nowhere. It's the dead of winter, and the forest is cloaked in an eerie silence. The moon hangs low in the sky, casting long, ghostly shadows on the snow-covered ground. I'm thinking, this is going to be one epic adventure. Now, I've heard all the spooky tales about the Wendigo, the creature from Native American legends. You know, the one that's part human, part monster, and all about munching on human flesh. Yeah, it's the kind of stuff that'll give you goosebumps. But I've always been the skeptical type. Stories are just stories, right? Boy, was I wrong. So, there I am, crunching through the snow, deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees are so tall and dense that they block out most of the moonlight, and the cold is gnawing at me like a hungry beast. I'm alone, and let me tell you, that solitude starts to feel pretty damn lonely real fast. As I'm trudging along, I start to notice things, like how the forest sounds different at night. It's not the usual chirping of crickets or rustling of leaves. It's dead silent, like the whole world is holding its breath. The air is so frigid that each breath I take feels like I'm inhaling ice crystals. And then, it happens. I hear this low, guttural growl, the kind that makes your spine go ice cold. At first, I try to convince myself it's just some animal, maybe a wolf or a bear. But this growl, it's like nothing I've ever heard before. It's like the forest itself is trying to tell me something I'm not gonna like. I reach for my flashlight and the darkness seems to close in around me as I click it on. I shine it into the blackness, and that's when I see it. A tall, bony figure lurking among the trees, like a nightmare come to life. The Wendigo. I could hardly believe it. I feel a shiver run down my spine as I lock eyes with it. Its limbs are long and twisted, like something out of a horror movie. Its skin is stretched tight over its skeletal frame, and it's wheezing, like it's struggling to breathe in the frigid air. But what really gets me are its razor-sharp teeth. Now, you'd think I'd turn and sprint out of there, but fear's a funny thing. It's got a way of making your legs feel like they're made of lead. I'm frozen in place like I've turned into a damn statue. And then, the Wendigo lets out this bone-chilling screech, like a tortured soul crying out in pain. That's when I finally snap out of it. I know I gotta move, and I gotta move fast. I turn and start running like my life depends on it, 'cause it probably does. The trees feel like they're closing in on me, their twisted branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. I can hear the Wendigo's ragged breathing getting louder behind me, and I know I'm in trouble. I keep running, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. It feels like I've been sprinting for miles, and I can't go on much longer. But I can't stop because I know that thing's still on my tail and it's hungry. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. My legs are like rubber, and I'm on the brink of collapse. Just when I think I can't run another step, I stumble into a small clearing in the woods. It's like a temporary reprieve, a moment to catch my breath. I know I can't stay here for long. The Wendigo's not far behind me, and it's not giving up. I look around, desperate for some way out of this nightmare. My flashlight's still in my hand, its beam cutting through the darkness. And then, I see it. A stack of firewood, maybe my only hope. I gather the wood as quickly as I can, my hands shaking with adrenaline. I know what I have to do. I'd heard in folklore that fire can hurt the Wendigo. It's a long shot, but it's all I've got. With a trembling hand, I light a piece of the firewood and watch as the flames threaten to go out. It's a small fire, but it's all I can manage right now. I know the Wendigo is almost upon me now. I have to act. I take a deep breath, light a nearby branch, and prepare to face whatever's coming. The Wendigo's screeches pierce the silence of the night, and another shiver goes down my spine, but I won't go down without a fight. As soon as its slender figure emerged from the clearing, I let out a primal scream and threw the flaming branch at it. Not a smart move in hindsight, throwing my best means of defending myself, but I get lucky. The branch hits the Wendigo in the chest and it recoils in pain, stopping in its tracks. It almost seemed surprised as it looked down at the now extinguished branch. To my surprise, the Wendigo hisses and takes a step back. The rumors about fire must be true. I stand defiantly behind the fire and light another nearby branch, hoping to intimidate the beast. The tension is thick as molasses. I'm exhausted and terrified, but I'm not backing down. The Wendigo is hesitant, unsure of its next move. With a final hiss, it turns away, its bony form disappearing into the dark woods. It's a reluctant retreat, but it's a retreat nonetheless. The fire has done its job, at least for now. I stand there, panting and overwhelmed, watching the Wendigo disappear into the trees. I know I can't stay here. The Wendigo may be wounded, but it could be back, and I need to get out of these woods. With a weary sigh, I turn and start the long, painful journey back to civilization. The legends were true, and I've lived to tell the tale of my unexpected encounter with the Wendigo. I made sure to keep the lit branch close in case the Wendigo tried to go after me again. Luckily, it held its flame long enough for me to escape the woods. I never thought I'd find myself in such a messed up situation. One moment, I'm scaling those rugged cliffs, pumped with adrenaline as I conquer the challenging rock face. The next, I'm flat on my back, pain in my leg that feels like someone's using it as a punching bag. My leg throbs like crazy and I can't move it without feeling like I'm getting electrocuted. Panic starts creeping in because I'm stranded high up on that cliff. No cell signal, and no one around to help. My only way out? Dragging myself to a cave I spotted earlier. It's a long shot, but it's all I got. As I inch my way into the cave's dark, gaping maw, something feels off. The floor is littered with bones, and not the animal kind. We're talking human bones. It sends a chill down my spine that's got nothing to do with my injured leg. The cave is like a freaky museum of horrors, a place where the unlucky met their gruesome end. I can't wrap my head around how so many people ended up here. Maybe they were climbers like me, stuck and desperate for shelter. I need answers, and I need to make sense of this creepy discovery, but I have to deal with my leg first. I rip a strip of cloth from my shirt, fashioning a makeshift bandage to at least ease the pain. But even as I'm doing that, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. The cave's silent, except for my heavy breathing that echoes like a sinister soundtrack. It's pitch black, and I'm cursing myself for leaving my flashlight on the ledge where I fell. Who knew I'd end up in a real-life horror show? Despite my leg yelling at me, I decide to explore deeper into the cave. I mean, what choice do I have? Those bones are like breadcrumbs, leading me further into the abyss. But the deeper I go, the more skeletons I find and dread setting in. And then, I hear it, a low, menacing growl that makes my hair stand on end. I'm not alone in this cave, and whatever's with me ain't friendly. I strain my eyes in the darkness, trying to spot the source of that growl. That's when I see him. Two glowing eyes lurking in the shadows. It's not some regular critter, it's something far worse. Out comes the creature from the shadows, revealing this nightmare-inducing figure. Its limbs are all twisted, skin stretched so tight it's like a freaky mask. I know what it is, even though I wish I didn't. It's a Wendigo. I'd heard the stories, the kind folks whisper around campfires. Legends of a creature born from desperation. Something that preys on humans. I hoped they were just stories, but there it was, right in front of me. The Wendigo's presence was suffocating, and I could feel its malevolence like a physical force. I knew I was no match for this beast. Even if my leg wasn't messed up, I still didn't stand a chance. If its menacing form wasn't enough to tell me this, the piles of human bones sure were. Instinct kicked in. I had to distract it, delay it, do anything to gain some distance. My trembling hand found a nearby rock, and I hurled it at the Wendigo with all the strength I could muster. It connected with a hollow thud, and the creature let out an ear-piercing shriek of frustration. It was all the time I needed to make my escape. In my desperation, I turned and scrambled deeper into the cave, not looking back. My injured leg screamed in protest with every painful inch I covered, but I had no other choice. I had to put as much distance between me and that wretched Wendigo as possible. The cave's passages twisted and turned like a demented maze, and I had no idea where I was headed. Fear gnawed at the edges of my mind as I contemplated the possibility of hitting a dead end or being lost forever in this subterranean labyrinth. But just when despair was about to take hold, I saw a faint glimmer of light up ahead. It was like a beacon of hope. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the pain, and finally emerged into the open air. The cave's exit was a small crack, barely large enough for me to squeeze through. I tumbled out onto the rocky ground, gasping for breath and trembling like a leaf in the wind. The Wendigo's enraged screeches echoed from the depths of the cave. It was trapped, too large to fit through the narrow passage. I knew I couldn't stay there, reveling in my escape. The Wendigo was relentless, and it would find another way out. Summoning every ounce of strength I had left, I forced myself to my feet and started hobbling away from the cave, my injured leg protesting with every step. The surrounding wilderness seemed like a haven compared to that cursed cave, but I couldn't rest. I needed to put as much distance between me and the Wendigo as possible. The legends had proven true, and I had walked the fine line between life and death. I hobbled my way through the forest, my injured leg throbbing with every step. The Wendigo's screeches still echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of the horrors I'd encountered. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a hiking trail. It was a stroke of luck, a lifeline out of this nightmare. I managed to flag down a group of hikers who were making their way through the woods. They looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief as I recounted my harrowing encounter with the Wendigo. I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was delirious, maybe even suffering from a head injury. One of them, a kind-hearted soul, helped me to their campsite and tended to my injuries. They contacted the authorities, and a rescue team was dispatched to bring me to safety. But as I sat by the campfire, wrapped in a warm blanket and sipping hot tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that no one truly believed my story. They nodded politely, patted me on the back, and exchanged knowing glances that said it all. I was just another lost hiker who had stumbled into the woods and gotten himself into trouble. In the end, I started to leave out the Wendigo from my harrowing climbing story. Everyone just thought I was nuts, and what's the point of telling people who just won't listen? But I know the truth, and that's all that really matters. Needless to say, I won't be climbing on that route anytime soon. I consider myself very lucky and will never doubt a Wendigo story again.